And welcome to video 3 tonight on factoring expressions. You had to go to the 3.2 extension lesson on factoring expressions at the top of page 92 to take a few notes. And there's something very important that you need to understand. Factoring is really simple. It's really simple. You got to think about it as being the opposite of distributing. So factoring is the opposite of distributing. When you think about it, addition and subtraction are opposite or inverse. Multiplication and division are opposite, they're inverse. And factoring and distributing, they're opposite, they're inverse. But there's a bunch of ways you can factor, and we'll talk about that as we go on. So let's do it. Think about doing the opposite of distributing. So now it says factor out the greatest common factor. So you take the numbers 3 and 12 and you do the greatest common factor. Well, that one's pretty easy because the factors of 3 are 1 and 3, and 12 are 1 and 12. They're 2 and 6. They're 3 and 4. And you recognize that the greatest common factor is 3. So if I factor a 3 out, that means I'm taking it out. Well, in distributing, we multiplied, and so in factoring, we're dividing. So I'm going to take a 3 out, and I'm going to put it in front of the parentheses, and I'm going to divide each term by that factor that we just took out, 3. Because when I take 3x and divide by 3, I get x. And when I take 12 and divide it by 3, I get 4. And then we are still adding them together because I factored that out. And you recognize that these are equivalent expressions. 3x plus 12 is equal to 3 times x plus 4. And how do I know that? Because I can take this and I can go 3 times x and get 3x, and 3 times 4 is 12. So it's the opposite of distributing. So let's do it a little bit quicker. Example 9, which is 5x minus 35. So the greatest common factor between 5 and 35 would be 5. So I'm going to take that 5 out, and now I divide each term by 5. Now remember, the term does include that negative sign. So 5x divided by 5 is x, and negative 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. It goes quickly. Example 10, 10x minus 50. I can see the 10. I'm giving you some easy ones so that you can get it down very quickly. And I divide each term by that 10 that I factored out. I get x, and since it's negative 50 divided by 10, I get negative 5. All right? Moving along with a couple more, just a tiny bit more challenging. 6x minus 27. Well, 6 is not a factor of 27. So now I got to really know what the common factors are. And it just so happens that in this case, it was 3. 3 would be the greatest common factor. So I'm going to take a 3 out, and I divide each term by 3. And 6x divided by 3 is 2x. And a negative 27 divided by 3 is negative 9. Okay? And our last one, pretty much the same as the ones we were practicing a moment ago. I can take a 4 out, and I can divide these both by 4. And this time I get negative x, and I get a positive 4. Okay? It's that quick and simple. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to factor out a fraction now, which is no different. It's still the same thing. And they're telling us what fraction to factor out. And so we're going to take out 1/5. And that 1/5, obviously, when I divide 1/5 by 1/5, they'll go away, and that's going to give me x. Now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to divide 4/5 by 1/5. I'm going to write it right next to it. And I remember that dividing means we are changing to multiplication by the reciprocal. So I'm going to take that dividing 1/5 away because I know that it's going to be changed to multiplying by the reciprocal. And then the 5's cancel out, and I get negative 4. I get negative 4 over 1, which is negative 4. Okay, let's do another one. Factoring out a 2/3. So I'm going to take a 2/3 out of this expression, 2/3 x plus 5/3. And now, of course, when I divide by 2/3, this goes away, leaving me with x. And then I come over here, and I'm going to divide by 2/3. But I remember, I'm going to make it simple. I'm going to actually multiply by 3/2. Because that's the reciprocal of dividing when we change it to multiplication. The 3's cancel out, so plus 5/2. You can leave it improper. You don't need to take it, if you wanted to, you could go 2.5 if you really wanted to, but I would just leave it improper. It's okay. Moving right along. We're going to factor out a negative. All right, so sometimes the greatest common factor would be negative. And so I come over here and I find that the greatest common factor would be -8. So I'm going to take out a -8. And if I divide both by a -8, I would get P, and this would be +6. Okay? P +6 when I divide those both by a negative. If I come to this one and take out a negative, the greatest common factor for this one would be 4. So I'm going to take out a -4. And so I divide each term by a -4, including that sign that comes before it. So a -12R divided by a -4 would be 3R. And then -20 divided by a -4 would be 5. All right? Well, that's it for factoring. And so you have two things to do on your last quick write. You have two expressions, factor out the GCF and then factor out the coefficient of the variable. Haven't said that before, but the coefficient of the variable, remember, is going to be the number that is attached to that variable. So you're going to factor out a 2/3 from E. Remember to come to class with questions tomorrow. Don't forget to start on your assignment with what time you have left in your quality of 45 minutes that you're putting in tonight. Be accountable. I'm saying it over and over and over again. The more you hear it, the more you think about it, the more you choose to do it, the easier it becomes, and the better you'll get at math. I guarantee it. The same with the aggressive and urgency on doing your assignments. When you need to do something, do it. Get it done. Don't waste time. Don't sit there and dilly-dally. Always using your time effectively. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you tomorrow.